call it. Tales. You have been forced to enter empty time. The desire that drove you has relinquished. There is nothing else to do now but rest and patiently learn to receive the self you have forsaken in the race of days. Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Isto. You've reached Chapter 4 of Tarot Tales, a weekly gathering where I tell a little-known fairy tale based on a randomly drawn tarot card from the week prior. Thank you for joining me here. If you were with me last week, you know that I drew the Four of Swords, which has this gorgeous knight resting on their tomb here, some gorgeous stained glass with some figures back there, and then obviously four swords. In particular, I drew this card reversed, so upside down. What I learned about this card is that this knight here represents rest, relaxation, meditation, recuperation, reflection, taking all of the good energy that you need to rejuvenate yourself. However, reversed, this can mean not doing that. So, in particular, I really resonated with this idea of burnout. He said, surrounded by the cocktail and all of the different things he's decided to do every week. So, I really leaned into that idea, this idea of not taking the rest and relaxation that you need. The other thing that I saw in my research is this idea that it could mean rejoining society after taking that break, but I leaned into the burnout pretty hard. Which is a sentence I've told my therapist before. All right, so for the drink this week, I have this lovely little refreshments list, which I was told by a good friend looks like a uterus. It was not intended to be a uterus. It was meant to be somebody meditating on a sword, but I love it. You know what? That's fine. If that's what you see, then I'm here for it, you know? The beverage for this evening is a custom-made punch called Burnout Juice, which is delicious. The salt mixed with the orange, mixed with the drink, highly recommend. And for those of you that are sober or not drinking alcohol, I have a virgin pina colada sin alcohol. So I hope that you are enjoying that if you decided to make one of those this evening. Regardless of whether or not you have one of those drinks, if you decided to join me here this week, I send a deep and hearty thank you and a cheers. Excellent. And if you would like to get these recipes, you can look in the description below to find different ways to stay involved. If you want to help support this, I would really appreciate it. You can do that by liking this video, subscribing to this channel, or sharing the content. I want to shout out specifically Amanda, Allie, Hannah, and Liz for all of your really cool photos. If you take any photos or get any good screen grabs, I'd love to see them. So thank you for sharing. In that description, you will also find the information for the text. So if you'd like to follow along with the text or find way more information and links than I have time to share with you in this actual show, then you can find them there, as well as a Google map of all of the different places that this story is going to reference this week. So look below to find all of that information. All right, so let's dig into it. Those of you that are following along on Instagram know that this week's story has a tie to Disney. And I'll be perfectly honest, I really, really resisted picking this story. I probably read for an additional 12 hours, like more fairy tales than I needed to, because I really didn't want to go with something because the whole idea is that it's like unknown. But I just kept thinking of this idea of burnout and the Flying Dutchman. And as I continued to learn a little bit more about the history of this story and where it came from, I was really compelled. I thought that it was something that a lot of people wouldn't know a lot about. And so I decided to do a deep dive. And so if you look at the text this week, you will see that this adaptation that I'm about to give to you all is a mix of 4 different source texts that I found from various different Google books that I've tried to string together to create a narrative. And I hope you enjoy it. I'm really excited about it. But I will say that the Flying Dutchman myth legend does not have a single origin text. It appears occasionally in some early documents and just generally grows as time goes on. So I'm really excited to share it with you all, and I'm going to try and highlight a couple of the different differences that show up that showed up in my research. So I'm very excited. So without further ado, let us dive in to Chapter 4, The Flying Dutchman. The children wandered up and down, seeking driftwood or the sand. The elder tugged at Granny's gown and pointed with his little hand. "Look, look," he cried, "at yonder ship that sails so fast and looms so tall." She turned and let her basket slip, and all her gathered treasure fall. "Nay, Granny, why are you so pale?" "Oh, child, that is no mortal sail." Our ship, after touching at the Cape of Good Hope, went out again, and soon after losing sight of Table Mountain, began to be assailed by the impetuous attacks of the sea. So, very quick pause to just place us in the world. We are at the southern tip of Africa, at the Cape of Good Hope, which underwent a fantastic rebranding campaign because apparently it was once called the Cape of Storms, which is much more fitting for this story. But Cape of Good Hope, fantastic. Let's go visit. Table Mountain is just a flat top mountain that exists in near Cape Town that you would be able to see if you were shipping away. So that's where we're at. Take a look at the atlas if you'd like to. The day had grown dull and hazy, and the breeze, which had formerly blown fresh, now sometimes subsided almost entirely, and then, recovering its strength for a short time and changing its direction, blew with violence and died away again, as if exercising a melancholy caprice. A heavy swell began to come from the southeast. Our sails flapped against the masses, and the ship rolled from side to side as heavily as if it had been waterlogged. There was so little wind that she could not steer. The seamen, growing restless, so if you attended the Virgilius Page of Pentacles story, you know you will be familiar with what I'm about to share with you. But a large group of pirates are a through line through this story. So I once again dug into my artistic roots and have created for you an amalgam character, which is this band of pirates. Arr! So band is the collective noun for pirates, band or gang, but we're going to go with band for this evening. So the seamen, growing restless, looked anxiously ahead. They said we would have a dirty night of it, and that it would not be worthwhile turning into their hammocks. As the sea ran high, the captain thought it safest to bring her to anchor. The watch on deck consisted of 4 men, one of whom was appointed to keep a lookout ahead, for the weather was so hazy that we could not see 2 cable lengths from the bows. All right, so I looked up what a cable length is. Apparently, it's like 720 feet, 220 meters, which is apparently 2 football fields long, which I also had to look up, but I needed a frame of reference that other people might understand. So 2 cable lengths would equal 4 football fields, which to me also seems like a really long distance, but I'm guessing if you're out at sea, you would expect you would be able to see that a little bit further. Anyway, we could not see 2 cable lengths different distance from the bows. This man, the one going on watch, was named Tom Willis, who went to the bows, as if to observe something. And when the others called to him, inquiring what he was looking at, he gave no answer. They therefore also went to the bows. Tom spoke. See you, beneath yon cloud so dark, fast gliding along a gloomy bark? Her sails are full, though wind is still, and there blows no breath her sails to fill. Ah, what doth that dark vessel bear? The silent calm of grave is there, save now and again a death knell rung, and flaps of sails with night fog hung? Asked one of them. Where is she? I do not see her. To which another replied, The flash of lightning showed that there was not a reef in one of her sails. Okay, so what we just heard, there was not a reef in one of her sails, has a little word that is very cool that we are going to have as our first vocab word. So this idea of reefing is something that I learned about. I am a sailor now, so come sail on my yacht. But reefing is a term where that means that a sail on a sailboat has been rolled up so as to not catch the wind. So when this pirate says, there was not a reef in one of her sails, what he means is none of the sails have been rolled up, which means that all of the sails are fully up on the ship. Now, that's actually not true in this version that I got. This is just the coolest one that I could find. But you can see here, this top part of the ship is called a top gallant. And these top gallants on this ship depiction are all reefed. That's what that looks like here. This also gives me another really cool opportunity to talk about one of the main differences in the various different Flying Dutchman myths. So, first of all, the older versions of the story represent the ship being completely canvassed, so no reefing at all. Even the top gallants are completely sailed up. And they are able to move against the wind if there's no wind at all. And that's what's spooky about the Dutchman. As time has gone on, more of the stories represent the Flying Dutchman as not having any sails at all, and yet it's still able to move, which is also quite spooky. Ooh. Anyway, so reefing, that's where we were at. You're welcome for this new vocab word. Join me on my yacht. There was not a reef in one of her sails, but we, who know her history, know that all of her canvas will never carry her to port. To which the other pirate replied, I have heard of her beating about in these seas. What is the reason she never reaches port? And Tom replied, and I imagine him kind of like smoking a cigarette in this moment, they give different reasons for it, but my story is this. She was an Amsterdam vessel and sailed from that port 70 years ago. Her master's name was Vanderdecken. She was a staunch sea wench. Okay, so don't get too excited. Vanderdecken, who is the main character in all of the Flying Dutchman myths, is in no textual account a woman, but when I was looking at folio pictures to use for this story, I found this badass lady pirate who had a gun in her hand, which is fitting for the story. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. This is my thing and it's a folktale, so I'm going to do it. But do know that textually it doesn't exist. But you know what? It's a magic flying ghost ship. So, all right. She was a staunch sea wench who believed neither saints, nor in God, nor anything else. And yet, for all that, never a sailor under her had reason to complain. Though, how it is on board now, nobody knows. She sailed one day to go south, and all went well as far as the Cape of Good Hope, which we saw this morning. But there she got a hard blow. The wind headed them and went against them more and more, and Vanderdecken walked the deck swearing at the wind. Everyone said to the captain, Captain, put in shore her, we are all lost. The captain laughed at the fears of her crew and her passengers, And she sang, the rascal, songs horrible enough to call down 100 times the thunderbolts on her masts. Then, as the captain scoffed at the tempest, a cloud opened and a huge figure appeared on the deck. It was the everlasting father. "Captain," it said, "you are out of your head." God is gay in this version. "And you are an uncivil fellow," said Vanderdecken. "Get out, or I'll blow your brains out." The venerable being replied nothing, but shrugged its shoulders. Then the captain seized one of her pistols, cocked it, aimed it at the cloud figure, and shot. But instead of wounding the white-bearded form, it pierced the captain's hand instead. She jumped up to give the old man a blow in the face, but her arm dropped suddenly in a palsy. The tall figure looked at her, disgusted, and said, "You are accursed. Heaven sentences you to sail forever, without being able to put into port or harbor. You shall have neither beer nor tobacco. You shall drink gall at all times. You shall chew red-hot iron for your quid. You shall eternally watch and shall never sleep. Because when you close your eyes, a long sword shall pierce your body. And since you love to torment sailors, you shall be the evil one of the seas. You shall wander ceaselessly throughout all latitudes. You shall have neither rest nor fine weather. You shall have the tempest for a breeze. The sight of your ship, which shall hover about to the end of time, will bring misfortune to all those who see it." Okay, so we're done with God now. Thank goodness. But the God just referenced something that is our second vocab word. So God just said, "the sight of your ship, which shall hover about to the end of time." And that references this idea of the Flying Dutchman, the fact that the ship is raised above the sea. And this actually isn't referenced really in any explicit way in any of the myths that I found. But I did some research on it. And it turns out that this is called a Fata Morgana. That's the fun name for it. But the actual scientific name is a superior mirage. But Fata Morgana is really cool because it's named after Morgan Le Fay from Arthurian legend. So this is a kind of mirage that changes very quickly and can be very deceiving, and would often be the inspiration for a lot of the witchcraft that Morgan Le Fay apparently allegedly created. And it's that same spooky mirage that's happening here. But scientifically, what's happening is that the air below the line of sight is colder than the air above it, which bends the light, meaning that the object that you're looking at appears to be above where it actually is. So that's definitely where the Flying Dutchman myth came from. The other thing that's really cool is that the superior mirages can also appear upside down, which would also be super spooky. Okay. "Shall hover about to the end of time, will bring misfortune to all those who see it." God is gone. "Since then, the Dutchman sails about in heavy weather, and her whole pleasure is in doing ill to poor sailors. 'Tis she who sends them white squalls, who wrecks ships or leads them on false courses. Her crew are accursed as well, for 'tis a gang of hardened sinners. There are those who say that the Flying Dutchman often has the audacity to visit passing ships, and when she does, there is war in the caboose. The wine sours, and all of the food becomes beans." I could have cut this line. It's not doing anything, but it cracks me up. I love that this spooky ghost ship in this one version that I found, it's just like, yeah, the Dutchman came, all the food's beans now. Just like, what a mildly inconvenient thing to happen on a ship. Anyway. "The wine sours and all the food becomes beans." Often, she sends letters on board ships that she meets, and if the captain reads them, they become mad, and their ship dances in air and finishes by turning over while pitching violently. Repelled from port to port, they sail in vain, and track with slow, unsteady sail the main. Where ne'er the bright and buoyant wave is seen, to streak with wandering foam the seaweeds green, towers the tall mast alone in the leafy tree, till self-impelled amid the waveless sea. It is believed that she continues to beat about in these seas still, and will do so long enough. This vessel is never seen. Tom's voice got sexier just now? I don't know. The vessel is never seen, but with foul weather along with her. Some of Tom's story had been overheard by the passengers and caused quite a commotion among them. In the meantime, the noise of the waves against the vessel could scarcely be distinguished from the sounds of distant thunder. The wind had extinguished the light in the binnacle where the compass was, and no one could tell which way the ship's head lay. I know what you're thinking. Isto, what's a binnacle? I'm so glad that you asked. All right, so a binnacle is this fun little apparatus that existed in front of the ship's steering wheel. And I've tried to create a little magnifying glass, but this is a somewhat difficult thing to try and describe with this cardboard card. But this compass would rest in here, and it could also have a light in it, or any other kind of navigation tool that would allow the captain to be able to direct the ship appropriately. But the most important thing for you to know is that that compass or that light would rest in a gimbal. What's a gimbal? I'm glad that you asked. So a gimbal is this series of concentric circles that you may have seen. So it's like 3 circles internally, which is this really cool piece of engineering that can turn in any direction that will allow the thing in the center to stay put. And this is super helpful for anybody that's going to be at sea. But in particular, it was used for compasses, it could be used for lights on the deck, but it could also be used for stoves, which is so cool. Like a stove inside of a gimbal? What? Amazing. And also, it could be used most importantly for drink holders. So, to all of my friends watching this, I would appreciate a gimbal for all of my drinks moving forward. Anyway, two fun words. You are welcome. The wind had extinguished the light in the binnacle where the compass was, and no one could tell which way the ship's head lay. A vivid flash of lightning showed the waves tumbling around us, and in the distance, the flying Dutchman scudding furiously against the wind under a press of canvas. The sight was but momentary, but it was sufficient to remove doubt from the minds of the passengers. One of the men cried out, "Vanderdecken again! Vanderdecken again!" And all who were on deck ran to the bows. Before us, we saw a black frigate, sailing so nearby that we could distinguish the figurehead on the prow, which represented a skeleton with a spear in its hand. The crew on the deck appeared to be clothed barely with skin, mostly in bone. Their eyes lay deep and fixed in their sockets like a corpse. After an interval of darkness, gleams of lightning began to reappear. Tom solemnly called out, "I see them letting down a boat." The next flash of lightning shone far and wide over the raging sea, and showed us not only the Flying Dutchman at a distance, but also a boat coming from her with 4 men. The boat was within 2 cables' length of our ship's side. The man who first saw her ran to the captain and asked whether or not they should hail her. The captain was walking about in great agitation and made no reply. The men looked at one another. The boat had come very near the anchor, when Tom Willis called out, "What do you want? Or what the devil has blown you here in such weather?" A piercing voice from the boat replied in English, "We want to speak with your captain." The captain took no notice of this, continued to pace wildly. But too soon one of the men came upon the deck. He appeared like a fatigued and weather-beaten seaman, holding letters in his hand. All our sailors drew back. The captain, however, looking steadfast upon him, went forward a few steps and said, "What is the purpose of this visit?" The stranger replied,
"We have long been kept here by foul weather, and Vanderdecken wishes to send these letters to their friends in Europe."
Our captain said as firmly as he could, "I wish Vanderdecken would put his letters on board any other vessel rather than mine." The stranger replied,
"We have tried many a ship, but most of them refuse our letters."
Upon which Tom Willis muttered, "It would be best for us if we do the same, for they say there is sometimes a sinking weight in your paper." The stranger took no notice of this, but asked where they were from. On being told that we were from Portsmouth, he said, as if with strong feeling,
"Would that you had rather been from Amsterdam. That we saw home again. We must see our friends again."
When he uttered these words, the men who were below in the boat below wrung their hands and cried in a piercing tone,
"Oh, that we saw home again. We must see our friends again."
The captain asked the stranger, "How long have you been at sea?"
"We have lost our count, for our almanac was blown overboard." "Why should you ask how long we have been at sea? We only wish to write home and comfort our friends."
The captain replied, "Your letters, I fear, would be of no use in Amsterdam, even if they were delivered. The persons to whom they are addressed are probably no longer to be found there, except on the very ancient green turf in the churchyard." The unwelcome stranger wrung his hands and appeared to weep, and replied,
"It is impossible. We cannot believe you. We have been long driving about here, but country and relations cannot be so easily forgotten. Here is a letter from our second mate to his dear and only remaining friend, his uncle, the merchant who lives in the second house on Stunken Yacht Quay."
He held forth the letter, but no one would approach to take it. Tom Willis raised his voice and said, "I was in Amsterdam last summer, and I know for certain that the street called Stunken Yacht Quay was pulled down 60 years ago, and now there is only a large church in that place." The stranger called out passionately,
"It is impossible. We cannot believe it. It is cruel to say such things to people in our condition. Here is a letter from our captain to his much beloved wife. She promised to have his house beautifully painted and gilded before he came back. You must take this letter to that kind woman."
There was silence. No one knew what to say to the man, for they were certain the lady was dead. Hearing no response to his plea, the stranger again shed tears.
"If you will not take the letters, I shall leave them."
And looking around, he offered the parcel to the captain, to the chaplain, to the rest of the crew successively, but each drew back as it was offered, put his hands behind his back. He then laid the letters upon the deck, and placed a piece of iron upon them which was lying near, to prevent them from being blown away. Having done this, he swung himself over the gangway into the boat. We heard the others speak to him, but the rise of a sudden squall prevented us from distinguishing his reply. The boat, which was at that point quite close, disappeared in an instant,
and there were no more traces, as if she had never been there. The sailors rubbed their eyes, as if doubting what they had witnessed, but the parcel of letters was still lying on the deck. Someone asked the captain if they should take it up and put them in a letter bag. Another speaker said, "I have always heard it asserted that it is neither safe to accept them voluntarily, nor, if they are left on the ship, to throw them out." "Let no one touch them," said the captain. "The way to do with the letters from the Flying Dutchman is to nail boards over them, so that if she sends back for them, they are still here to give her." The carpenter went to fetch his tools. During his absence, the ship gave so violent a pitch that the piece of iron slid off the letters, and they whirled overboard by the wind, like birds of evil omens whirring through the air. There was a cry of joy among the sailors, and they ascribed the favorable change which soon took place in the weather to our having gotten away from Vanderdecken. And away from that accursed sight they fled until the break of day. And oft did they recount that night, that fearful ship all decked with gray. For up and down the roaring seas, for ever and for aye she sails, in calm or storm against the breeze, unshaken by the wildest gales. And wheresoe'er her form appears, come trouble and disaster sore. And she has sailed 100 years, and she will sail forevermore. The end. I hope you enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun doing such a deep dive. Y'all, Google Books is such an incredible resource. Before I move on and close things down, I do want to highlight a couple of different things that I learned about this specific myth. So, the original sin in this story, the one that originally attracted me to it, was this idea of Vanderdecken going against the wishes of his crew, against intelligence and good odds, and deciding to go into a storm despite the fact that they were not likely to be successful and being punished as a result of it. That, however, is not like the only myth that exists, but it's the burnout connection. There were a couple of other different ones that I want to let you know about. So, one was this idea that Vanderdecken killed the ship's boy and was cursed as a result of that. Another was that the ship contracted the plague or some kind of plague, either via curse or they just did, and they roamed from port to port because no one would ever let them dock. And the final one, a more recent version of it, that I would love to do a much deeper dive into at a later point, was that the idea was the ship was a slaver's ship and that the curse was a result of the evil deed that they were carrying out, which I also find really fascinating. So those are a couple of the differences there. I hope that this story, these different texts, and that background provides a little bit more flavor, a little bit more color to your Pirates of the Caribbean, which I watched in preparation for this, and also your SpongeBob, which I will share. My partner was the first thing out of his mouth. Oh, like the SpongeBob episode? So please take all of this information with you. Send them to this video for a little bit of historical context anytime you're interested in learning more about the Flying Dutchman. Thanks for sticking with me today. At this point, I would normally draw a tarot card. However, I'm doing something a little different next week, which will either be wildly apparent to you or you will have no idea is different. So I apologize for breaking the rules, but rules are meant to be broken. And I am here to let you know that I drew the Six of Cups a little bit before this show in order to get a head start on next week's work.
So I don't know a whole lot about this about this card. I'm excited to learn a little bit more. But if you know anything about it that you'd like to share with me, please use the feedback form below and the story suggestion form below to share any information that you have. Or if you have general feedback about this show, ways that we can engage you or make this more fun, please let me know. I'm always looking for feedback. My gratitude this week goes to the man that helped me make sound happen. Benjamin Truppen Brown is a lovely man. I imagine there are a number of you that are watching it this evening that know him. He is one of the kindest, sweetest, smartest people that I've had the pleasure of meeting. And he answered endless questions from me about sound and microphones, which is why I have this beautiful microphone that I still don't fully understand how to use. But he has consistently been a very supportive presence as I have kicked up this little dream of mine. So, Ben, from everyone that is in your life that you were incredibly kind to and very supportive of, thank you. And now, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you treat yourself with love and respect. May you continue to grow and find the strength to persevere through the painful parts of growth. May you find inspiration all around you. And may you find peace. Thank you for joining me this week. Until next week, bye, y'all.